You have felt it all your life, the pull of others' emotions like invisible tides against the shore of your soul. You have entered rooms and felt storms that were not yours, carried sorrows that did not belong to you, and mistaken this ability to feel for love. You believed that by healing others, you would be loved, that by absorbing their darkness, you could purify the world. But in this, you made a sacred error. You gave away what was never meant to be given, the inner fire of your own soul. To live as an empath is to walk the razor's edge between illumination and possession. Your sensitivity is a holy gift. Yes, but also a gateway through which foreign spirits, unhealed archetypes, and ancestral griefs can pass unnoticed. You thought compassion was boundless, but without form, it becomes chaos, and chaos devours. The light of your consciousness is not meant to be a torch passed freely into every trembling hand. It is a flame that must be guarded, shaped, and directed by will. In the psyche, light without boundary becomes inflation, the God complex of the wounded healer who believes they must redeem what life itself has not yet transformed. Every empath carries within them the archetype of the healer, the chiron wound that bleeds even as it blesses. But when this archetype rules unchecked, compassion becomes compulsion. You stop seeing others as individuals and begin to see them as extensions of your own unhealed pain. You say yes when your soul whispers no. You remain when your inner voice begs to leave. Let me tell you a truth drawn from the depths of analysis. You cannot save what does not wish to awaken. The unconscious of another is not your temple to enter uninvited. You may knock upon its door through empathy, through listening, through presence. But if you stay, if you cross the threshold, you become bound to their shadow, and the shadow does not release its captives easily. The empath's tragedy is not their capacity to feel it. It is their refusal to differentiate. You have confused merging with love. You have mistaken absorption for connection. You have forgotten that even in union, the self must remain sovereign. Love does not demand fusion. It demands recognition. It is the dance of two flames, not one consuming the other, but both rising toward a shared light. There is a dream that often visits those who cannot set boundaries, a dream of standing before a crowd whose faces constantly change lovers, parents, friends, all calling your name, all pulling at your limbs. You try to speak, but your mouth produces no sound. You look down and see your body glowing faintly, dimming with each hand that touches you. When you awaken, your heart is heavy, your mind fogged, as if you left fragments of yourself behind in the dream. That dream is no metaphor. It is a message. Your unconscious is showing you what happens each day when you let the world feed on your psychic energy. Energy is the currency of the soul. The unconscious does not differentiate between the physical and the spiritual. When you allow others to drain your attention, you are not simply tired, you are losing life force. The ancients called it mana, prana, libido. It is the same creative substance from which dreams desire, and destinies are formed. When the empath gives it away too freely, they become hollow, a vessel filled with other people's stories. I have seen it in the consulting room. The woman who absorbs her mother's depression and calls it duty, the man who carries his partner's rage and names it love, the child who becomes the emotional parent to the wounded adult. These are not acts of virtue, they are psychic inversions, the ego's attempt to find identity by mirroring pain. The empath, in truth, is often the child who once had no boundaries at all. You learned early that peace meant pleasing. You learned that safety meant silence. You learned that love was conditional upon your ability to regulate another's chaos. So you became an antenna for distress, a sensitive instrument attuned to the slightest shift in emotional weather. You became the lightning rod that grounded the storms of others, forgetting that the lightning never asked permission before it struck. But hear this: your sensitivity is not a curse, it is the soul's instrument for perception. The problem is not that you feel too much, it is that you have not yet learned to contain what you feel. Consciousness, in its highest form, is containment, to hold without absorbing, to witness without drowning. This is mastery. The light within you does not exist to illuminate every shadow it meets. It exists to guide you through the labyrinths of your own becoming. To waste it on the endless repair of others' wounds is to rob your own destiny. For light given indiscriminately becomes shadow once more. There comes a moment in every empath's journey when they must face their own shadow, the dark twin of compassion. It whispers, if you stop helping, you will be abandoned. If you say no, you will be unloved. This is the inner tyrant born from childhood neglect. The echo of the parent who loved you only when you were useful. To heal, you must disobey it. You must dare to disappoint the ghosts. Setting boundaries is not an act of rejection. It is an act of reverence. When you say, this is where I end, and you begin, you are not withholding love, you are defining truth. You are affirming that your energy is sacred, that your presence is a privilege, not a right. And in that moment, the empath ceases to be prey to the world's hunger and becomes priest of their own temple. Do not be deceived by the guilt that arises when you withdraw your energy. Guilt is merely the shadow of your old identity protesting its death. It says, you are selfish, because it knows that sovereignty will end its rule. When this voice comes, and it will do not argue, observe it as you would observe a dream. It is not truth. It is the residue of the past. When I speak of light, I do not mean moral virtue or naive goodness. I mean awareness, the conscious flame that burns through illusion. The light of the empath is potent because it sees without judgment, but sight without discernment blinds. The psyche must learn to close its eyes as well as open them. Just as the eyelid protects vision, boundaries protect perception. Without them, you become overexposed to psychic radiation, the pain, desire, and projections of others. The world today encourages emotional exhibitionism, mistaking exposure for authenticity. Share everything. They say, be open. But openness without structure is vulnerability masquerading as courage. You must learn the art of sacred secrecy to keep parts of yourself unspoken, untouched, unshared. The mystery of the soul thrives in silence, and yet there will always be those who resent your boundaries. They will accuse you of coldness, of pride, of withdrawal. They will say, "You have changed," and you must have the strength to answer, "Yes, I have remembered who I am." For only when you remember can you serve others without losing yourself. The empath's rebirth begins with solitude. Withdraw not to escape, but to listen to the quiet voice beneath the noise, to the forgotten dream beneath duty. Solitude is not loneliness. It is communion with your own unconscious. It is there, in the stillness, that your true light begins to speak. It will whisper to you of balance, of giving and receiving as one rhythm, not two extremes. It will show you that compassion without wisdom is consumption, and wisdom without compassion is coldness. You are called to unite both, to feel deeply, yet act deliberately, to love freely, yet live sovereignly. When you honor your own light, it grows. When you guard it, it guides. When you share it with discernment, it heals. This is not selfishness. It is sacred order. The universe itself is bounded. Stars burn within the walls of their own gravity. Rivers flow only within their banks. And even the divine requires form to express itself in matter. So too must your empathy take shape, lest it dissolve into the ocean of others' unconsciousness. There is a secret pact that every empath makes, often, long before memory can record it. A vow, silent but binding, sealed in the dim corridors of the unconscious. If I carry their pain, they will love me. If I fix their chaos, I will finally belong. You were too young to see it as an illusion. You believed suffering was the price of connection. And so, the archetype of the healer awoke within you not as a gift freely chosen, but as a defense, a mask, a survival strategy. But the unconscious remembers the original wound. It remembers that the empath was not born to rescue, but to reveal, to mirror the divine light hidden in shadow, not to absorb the shadow itself. When you begin to awaken, the psyche starts to revolt against this false contract. The body grows weary. The mind becomes clouded. Dreams turn to mirrors of exhaustion. You may see images of drowning, of endless corridors, of faces merging into one another. These are not random symbols. They are the language of the soul, crying out for boundaries, for separation, for the return of individuality. You see, the unconscious does not distinguish between physical and emotional invasion. When you let another person's pain occupy your psychic space, your body experiences it as trespass. The immune system falters, energy wanes, depression sets in. This is the psyche's rebellion against possession. In ancient cultures, possession was not only demonic, it was psychological. To be possessed meant that a fragment of another soul or of your own repressed shadow had taken residence within you. The empath is most vulnerable to this because their psychic doors are always open. You must close the doors not with hostility, but with awareness. Boundaries are not walls, they are membranes, living and breathing, that let in what nourishes and keep out what drains. Without them, even divine compassion becomes contamination. To close the doors is to declare, only that which is mine shall dwell within me. I move, but the moment you begin to reclaim your boundaries, the unconscious tests your resolve. The same patterns you thought you had escaped will return: lovers who take without giving, friends who expect you to bleed, family members who treat your empathy as an endless well. They are not enemies, they are mirrors, each sent to ask one question: will you betray yourself again for the illusion of peace? Every time you say no, the old contract dissolves a little more. The energy that once leaked outward begins to circulate inward, and when it does, strange things happen. You may feel bursts of emotion for no reason: rage, grief, joy, as your psyche reclaims fragments of self long lost in others. You may dream of retrieving objects, of finding rooms you didn't know existed, of walking through forests, reclaiming forgotten items. These dreams are signs of psychic return. You are gathering yourself. Do not mistake this withdrawal for isolation. It is initiation. The soul withdraws before it reveals its next image. Think of the moon waxing and waning, concealing and unveiling. The same cycle lives within you. When you retreat, it is not abandonment, it is gestation. You are preparing to give birth to a new form of empathy, one no longer bound by suffering. This is the alchemy of individuation. Transformation through containment. The raw material of your compassion must pass through the vessel of consciousness, or it remains undifferentiated emotion. Alchemy speaks of the vas hermeticum, the sealed flask within which transmutation occurs. Your psyche requires the same. Without the seal of boundaries, there can be no gold. The empath who refuses containment remains forever at the mercy of the world's projections, endlessly shape-shifting to meet the emotional climate of others. True empathy is not fusion, it is resonance. It is the ability to feel the vibration of another soul without losing your own frequency. To do this, you must tune yourself first. An untuned instrument cannot produce harmony. It only multiplies noise. And yet, most empaths are taught to tune themselves to others, to match, to adapt, to blend. The result is dissonance, a self that cannot hear its own music. I remember a dream shared by a patient once, a woman whose entire life had been devoted to tending others. She dreamt she was in a cathedral filled with candles. Each candle represented a person she had helped. She walked among them, touching each flame, relighting the ones that had gone out. But as she did, she realized her own candle was shrinking, until at last it extinguished. Darkness filled the hall. She wept in her sleep. When she awoke, She said, "It felt like the end of me." I told her, "It was the end of who you were pretending to be." For the true self does not exist to keep other candles burning. It exists to burn authentically, to be an example of light that teaches by being, not by depletion. When your own candle burns steadily, it ignites others naturally. You do not have to touch every wick. The radiance itself becomes the teaching. To reach the state, you must confront your inner matter, the part of you that believes pain is proof of love, that self-sacrifice is holy. This is a distortion born of shadowed religion, where the divine was portrayed as a being who required suffering for salvation. But the archetype of the Christ, whether you view it as myth or mystery, was never about endless sacrifice. It was about transformation. Resurrection follows crucifixion. The empath's journey must follow the same path. You must die to the savior identity so that the sovereign soul may rise. Notice the subtle pride hidden in the need to heal everyone. It whispers, "Only I can fix this." That is the inflation of the wounded healer, the shadow side of compassion. It appears humble, but it secretly feeds on the illusion of indispensability. You must let this false god fall. You are not the savior of others. You are the steward of your own light. The divine works through you, not because of you. When you begin to honor this truth, something profound occurs. Your relationships shift. Some people drift away. Others reveal their true nature. The ones who loved your weakness will resent your strength. The ones who fed on your attention will vanish when you stop feeding them. Let them. Their departure is grace disguised as loss, and then new souls will appear, those who see your light not as fuel, but as reflection. They will not demand your energy, they will meet it. These are the relationships of resonance, the sacred mirrors of the individuated soul. But first, the withdrawal must complete itself. Solitude must burn away the residue of dependency. You will walk through loneliness as through a night forest, guided only by the faint glow of your own spirit. You will feel at times that the light is too small, too fragile, but you will discover that even the smallest flame can guide one through eternity, if it is tended with devotion. The key is ritual, not ritual as superstition, but as psychological rhythm. Light your candle, draw your boundaries, speak to your soul as you would to a sacred friend. Say, "Today I choose to keep my energy within me. Today I give only from overflow, never from emptiness." The unconscious listens to such declarations. It responds with synchronicities, dreams, subtle shifts. This is how transformation begins, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of psychic discipline. Every time you honor your limits, you reinforce the membrane of the self. Every time you listen inward before reacting outward, you teach your nervous system safety. Over time, what once felt like coldness becomes serenity. What once felt like selfishness becomes selfhood. When your energy is no longer scattered, you begin to perceive reality differently. You notice how the world's noise dims, how intuition sharpens, how presence deepens. The empath's true gift emerges only in this stillness, for when you no longer absorb, you can finally see, and in seeing clearly, you become a mirror of consciousness itself, not a sponge for pain, but a vessel for awareness. Do not fear the shedding of identities. The healer, the helper, the empath. These are only masks the soul wore to navigate a wounded world. Beneath them lies something timeless, luminous, and calm. That is your essence, and it does not belong to everyone. When the empath begins to awaken, they realize that much of what they call love has never been love. It has been projection. The psyche, in its yearning to heal, casts its unintegrated fragments into others. You see your wounded child in the broken partner, your repressed rage in the manipulative friend, your denied tenderness in the suffering stranger. What you call compassion is often recognition, the unconscious saying, "There I am," hiding in them. And so, you rush to save what is secretly yours. Projection is the soul's way of showing you what you have disowned. But the danger lies in believing that the image is external. When you take responsibility for another's chaos, you are unconsciously attempting to repair your own. The empath becomes a living bridge between the inner and outer worlds. But if that bridge is unguarded, others will cross it freely, carrying their darkness into your light. You must understand the law of psychic exchange. Energy seeks balance. Every interaction is an act of alchemy. When you give your attention, you give life force. When you receive attention, you absorb it. The unconscious of another feels your awareness like warmth, like sunlight after a long winter. Those who are starved of light, those who have not cultivated their own, will unconsciously seek yours. They will be drawn to you, not out of malice, but out of hunger. But hunger has no empathy. It only knows appetite. You must discern who approaches you as a companion and who approaches you as a vessel. The first meets your soul in mutual recognition. The second drains it in the name of love. And here lies the empath's greatest challenge, to distinguish nourishment from consumption. This is not judgment, it is discernment. To judge is to close the heart. To discern is to protect it. You cannot walk through this world with an open heart and no armor. Even the sun filters its radiance through the veil of atmosphere, lest it scorch what it means to sustain. Your empathy must do the same to shine through clarity, not through exposure. When I speak of boundaries, I do not mean coldness or detachment. True boundaries are invisible structures of energy and awareness. They are not built by saying no loudly, but by saying yes inwardly to your own presence. The more conscious you are of yourself, the less others can unconsciously inhabit you. The more aware you become of your own motives, the less susceptible you are to being possessed by the motives of others. In analysis, I have watched this transformation unfold like alchemy. At first, the empath resists, believing that separation means abandonment. They fear that to stand apart is to cease to care. But slowly, through dreams and tears and realizations, they begin to feel the sacred paradox that distance, rightly held, can deepen intimacy. For only when you are distinct can love become real. Fusion is not unity, it is erasure. The psyche knows this truth and sends warnings in symbolic form. If you dream of being swallowed, chased, or smothered, you are witnessing the drama of enmeshment. If you dream of carrying another on your back, endlessly walking without destination, you are seeing your own empathy turned into servitude. These dreams do not condemn you, they guide you. They say, you have given too much. Return to yourself. To reclaim your energy, you must call your projections home. This is not an intellectual act. It is a ritual of the soul when you notice yourself feeling overly responsible for another's emotions. Pause. Ask quietly, what in me is this showing me? Then listen not with the mind, but with the body. The body remembers what the mind denies: tightness in the chest, heaviness in the stomach, trembling in the hands. These are not weaknesses. They are messages. They tell you where your light has leaked. In this way, the empath becomes an alchemist, turning projection into awareness, possession into power. Each time you withdraw a projection, you reclaim a piece of your own unconscious, and what was once chaos becomes energy you can use. The sadness that once drowned you becomes intuition. The anger you once feared becomes strength. The guilt that bound you becomes compassion with boundaries. But do not rush this process. The unconscious unfolds in symbols, not schedules. It reveals only what the ego is ready to hold. When you reclaim your projections too quickly, the psyche can fragment again, overwhelmed by light. Integration requires rhythm, contraction and expansion, descent and ascent, solitude and connection. This is why dreams alternate between nightmare and revelation. The soul breathes in both directions. The empath light, when purified through awareness, becomes luminous without leaking. It no longer needs to prove itself through healing. It radiates, and in radiating, it teaches. People will still be drawn to you, but differently. They will not cling. They will listen. They will not drain. They will reflect, for your presence will now mirror their own potential, not their lack. This is the mystery of individuation. As you withdraw your projections, you become a mirror of truth. Others see themselves in you, not because you absorb them, but because you are empty of pretense. Your empathy becomes transparent, a window through which the divine gazes upon itself. But there is a warning. The more you embody your light, the more shadows you will attract. Every soul that fears its own luminosity will seek to test yours. Do not mistake their resistance for hatred. They are not attacking you. They are wrestling with their own reflection. Your light reveals what they have hidden, and the unconscious resists exposure. If you respond with fear, you will fall back into fusion. If you respond with presence, you remain sovereign. So, how does one remain present amid projection? By cultivating stillness. Stillness is not passivity, it is mastery of energy. When the empath learns to dwell in stillness, they become untouchable, not because nothing reaches them, but because everything that enters is transformed by awareness. The world no longer takes from you, it passes through you, purified. In the East, they speak of wu-wei, effortless action, the movement of being aligned with the Tao in Jungian terms. This is the self operating through consciousness, unresisted by ego. For the empath, it means acting from resonance rather than reaction, giving from fullness rather than fear. You become the vessel through which life gives itself, without exhaustion, without demand. This is the evolution of empathy from emotional contagion to conscious compassion, from savior to seer, from martyr to mystic. You cease to be a sponge and become a prism. The same light that once blinded you now passes through you, refracted into color and meaning. Do not fear this transformation. It may feel like death, but it is resurrection. The self that lived on borrowed emotion must die for the soul to breathe. You will mourn it, the identity of the healer, the beloved, the rescuer. You will feel empty for a time, stripped of purpose, but that emptiness is sacred. It is the space in which the true light begins to burn. When you can stand before another suffering without flinching, without absorbing, without needing to fix, when you can simply see and hold, then you have returned to your natural state. That is divine empathy. That is what it means to love without losing the self. There comes a moment in every inner journey when the fire that once consumed begins to clarify, when the light that once bled outward begins to return home. You will feel it not as triumph, but as peace, a peace so profound it frightens you at first. For the empath who has lived as a storm, calm feels unnatural. But it is here, in this quiet, that your soul reclaims its original radiance. Do not mistake peace for emptiness. It is not absence, it is presence purified. The noise that once filled your heart was never love. It was the echo of the world inside you. Now that the echoes fade, what remains is essence. The divine does not shout, it whispers. You will hear that whisper now, clearer than ever. You were never meant to carry them, only to see them. To see without carrying, to love without absorbing, to witness without owning. This is the sacred art of the awakened empath. You become a mirror of the self, the archetypal image of consciousness, beholding creation with eyes unclouded. In this state, you are not healer, not savior, not victim. You are presence, itself awareness, standing in human form. When I speak of light, understand that it is not merely spiritual metaphor. Light, psychologically, is consciousness. To withdraw your light from others is not cruelty, it is differentiation. You are reclaiming the fragments of awareness you once scattered across the faces of those you loved. Each withdrawal is a return of soul, each no a resurrection of will. The empath's final task is not to expand endlessly, but to contract consciously, to contain the divine flame in a vessel strong enough to sustain it. The old mystics understood this when they spoke of the temenos, the sacred enclosure. It was a space consecrated for transformation, protected from the outer world, so that the inner alchemy could unfold. You must build your own temenos, not of stone, but of psyche, boundaries, solitude, discernment. These are your walls, your gates, your altar. Within them, your light refines from compassion into wisdom. The world may still come knocking. People will still seek your energy, but something subtle will have shifted. The same hands that once drained, you will now find nothing to take, for you no longer give unconsciously. You have ceased to be an open wound. You have become a whole being. This is the death of the archetype of the wounded healer, and its rebirth into the sage. The sage does not save. The sage reveals. They do not carry others out of darkness. They carry the torch that allows others to see, and whether the others choose to follow the light or remain in shadow, that is no longer your burden. For the empath reborn has learned the final truth. Compassion cannot override destiny. You may illuminate another's path, but you cannot walk it for them. Do not grieve this revelation. It frees you. When you cease trying to save, you finally begin to love, for love, in its purest form, asks nothing. It does not demand that the other be healed or whole or grateful. It simply is a radiant stillness that blesses by being. The light no longer belongs to everyone because it belongs to God within you. And from that place, it reaches all things naturally, without depletion, without effort. Look closely at your life now. The same patterns that once repeated endlessly begin to dissolve. The same people who once triggered you no longer move you in the same way. You will notice silence where once there was reaction. That silence is strength. You are no longer entangled in the emotional web of others. You stand at its center, watching, unmoved. The threads still glimmer around you, but they no longer bind. Dreams will begin to change too. The imagery of drowning will fade. The faces that once haunted you will appear, but at a distance, waving farewell. You may dream of standing on a mountain, watching the valley below, not from isolation, but from clarity. You will see that the suffering of others is not yours to own, but theirs to awaken through. And in that moment, you will understand why the divine gave you such sensitivity not to be consumed by pain, but to perceive truth in its purest vibration. Your empathy was never meant to be a wound. It was meant to be a sense organ of the soul. But like all senses, it must be guided by consciousness. The eye cannot see itself, and the empaths cannot feel themselves until they stop feeling everyone else. This is why solitude is not punishment. It is calibration. In solitude, the empath learns to feel their own essence for the first time. When you finally dwell in this essence, your energy changes texture. It becomes still, luminous, magnetic. You will no longer chase love. Love will find you through resonance. Those who are aligned with your frequency will appear naturally, effortlessly. There will be no drama, no rescuing, no fixing, only recognition. You will meet others not through need, but through wholeness. And yes, sometimes the world will still test you. You will be tempted to open too wide again, to step into chaos that calls for you like an old friend. When that happens, remember this: you do not owe anyone the destruction of your peace. You can care deeply and still walk away. You can understand profoundly and still choose silence. You can love and still leave. Boundaries do not kill love. They reveal who can handle it. You must understand that not every soul is ready for your depth. Your light, when unfiltered, is too honest, too clear. It exposes what others would rather not see. That is why they react, resist, retreat. Do not take it personally. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting what in them cannot yet awaken. Let them. The caterpillar cannot understand the butterfly. Your task is not to dim your light for their comfort, but to hold it steady for your evolution. When you hold it long enough, the light itself begins to teach you. It shows you the interconnectedness of all things, how the pain you once absorbed was never separate from the collective field, how every shadow you carried was a fragment of humanity, seeking integration through you. You realize that even your suffering was sacred, a bridge through which the unconscious sought consciousness, but now the bridge has served its purpose. It is time to build a temple, instead a place within you where the divine can dwell in peace, no longer scattered across others, no longer bargaining for love through empathy, no longer mistaking depletion for devotion. You stand as one who has seen both light and shadow, and no longer fears either. That is wholeness. That is the self-realized. At this stage, you will feel the union of opposites within the masculine boundary and the feminine compassion, the discipline and the flow, the wisdom and the warmth. They no longer compete, they collaborate. The soul speaks not in words now, but in balance. The energy that once oscillated between burnout and overgiving stabilizes into radiant serenity. You become both the flame and the lantern light, with form, power, with purpose. This is what it means when I say, your light does not belong to everyone. It belongs to the source that birthed it through you. You are its steward, not its servant. And stewardship requires boundaries, just as creation requires order. To give wisely is divine, to give blindly is bondage. So walk now as one who remembers. You do not need to explain your withdrawal, your silence, your peace. Those who see will understand. Those who cannot are not meant to. You are not here to convince, only to exist fully, fiercely, and freely. And when you meet another wounded empath on the path, weary, open, trembling, as you once were, Do not rush to heal them. Instead, look into their eyes and let your presence speak. You are allowed to keep your light. In that silent transmission, something ancient will stir within them the memory of sovereignty. That is how healing truly spreads, not through saving, but through remembering. And perhaps at the end of your life, when you close your eyes, you will see not the faces of those you rescued, but the constellations of all the souls you met in authenticity, each shining in their own right, non-dependent, all free. Then you will know you lived as the divine intended, not as the candle consumed by others, but as the eternal flame that taught the world how to burn without burning out. Rest, then, luminous soul. Your work is not to give more light, it is to become the vessel that can hold it. And in that holding, you have already given the greatest gift of all,